So, what happens when you take an ancient, mystical tradition and run it through a modern scientific filter? That's the core idea behind biosufism. It's a really fascinating attempt to look at one of the world's deepest spiritual paths through a whole new lens. We're going to dive into how this filter works, what it keeps, what it leaves behind, and why it might matter today. All right, here's the game plan. First, we'll tackle why Sufism is so misunderstood in the first place. Then we'll get into what exactly this pro-science filter is. After that, we'll explore the incredible science of awe, see how all this can be applied to some of the world's biggest problems, and finally, we'll wrap up by looking at what a post-Sufi future could even mean. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Before you can filter something, you gotta understand what you're dealing with. And with Sufism, or Tasawwuf as it's traditionally known, that's where the confusion really starts. I mean, seriously, what is Sufism? What's fascinating here is that it's not just us asking this question. The sources we're looking at point out that even top-notch academics call it a dauntingly difficult subject to pin down. So if the experts are scratching their heads, it's no wonder the rest of us get it mixed up. The real question is, why? Why is it so complicated? Well, this slide gets right to the heart of it. You've got this 1400-year evolution. The early stuff, the original Tasawwuf, was super personal, very introspective. It was all about private meditation, tahanuth, and this idea of ihsan, basically trying to connect with the divine using your deepest heartfelt imagination. But as the centuries went on and it spread across the globe, other things got mixed in. You started seeing these folk practices like venerating saints or visiting their tombs, their dargahs. These became really popular, but they were different from that original core. And here's the kicker. For a lot of people, especially in more traditional circles, those later practices became the only thing they saw. So this huge misunderstanding took root, that Sufism is just saint worship, period. But that view completely misses the deep philosophical origins that, believe it or not, were once celebrated by the biggest names in traditional scholarship. And if you want proof of just how respected it was, check this out. This is from Al-Ghazali, an absolute giant in Islamic history. Back in the 12th century, he wasn't just tolerating Sufism. He was saying it was the ideal. He wanted every Muslim to think like a Sufi. That tells you that whatever he was seeing in Sufism was a far cry from the folk practices that came to define it later. Okay, so we've got this complicated, misunderstood tradition. How do you sort through it all in the 21st century? Well, that brings us to a really new idea, applying a pro-science filter, which is where we meet BioIslam and Biosufism. So first, let's zoom out to the bigger picture. The parent concept here is BioIslam. You can think of it as scientific Islam. It's an approach that says, hey, let's value the principles that actually hold up and are consistent with what we know from science today. And from that big idea, we get Biosufism. Now, the goal here isn't to throw out 14 centuries of tradition, not at all. It's about applying this pro-science filter to it, to see what passes through, what's timeless, and what might be a product of its time. So what does this filter actually look for? Well, it checks if these ancient ideas line up with modern fields like neuroscience or consciousness studies. For instance, Sufis have talked for centuries about deep states of awareness for meditation. Today, neuroscience can actually show us what's happening in the brain during those states, so we have a new language for it. The filter is designed to sift out the later syncretic stuff, like saint worship, and really zero in on the core. Again, it's not about rejecting Sufism, it's about clarifying it. This leads to a really cool question. Once you apply this filter, what's actually left? What makes the cut? Well, the answer is kind of beautiful. It's all about a profound sense of wonder, or what we might call the science of awe. And here's what's so interesting. This filter doesn't just keep old ideas around, it actually elevates them. It shines a new spotlight on these powerful concepts about awe and bewilderment that maybe got a little lost in the shuffle over the centuries. So the first big concept is hera. This isn't just being surprised. It's that deep, mind-bending, cosmic awe. It's the feeling you get when you really truly think about the universe, about quantum physics, about the nature of reality itself, and you just feel this profound sense of bewilderment. It's the awe you feel standing at the very edge of what we know. And right alongside that bewilderment comes this next idea, heba. This is the other side of the coin. It's the joy you find in that confusion. It's not a scary, anxious feeling of not knowing. It's an expansive, thrilling joy. It's the excitement of the mystery,
the humility and curiosity that makes you want to learn more.
So, what all this awe and joy points to is a different way of knowing things. On the one hand, we all have our reason, our logic, what's called aql, and that's absolutely essential. But Sufism and BioSufism says there's another faculty too, gnosis or irfan. Think of it like a super-powered intuition. It's a more subtle, direct way of knowing that works with reason, but sometimes can even go beyond it. Okay, great. Cosmic awe, mystical intuition. Sounds pretty cool. But you might be thinking, so what? How does this help anyone in the real world? Well, the argument here is that this kind of thinking isn't an escape. It's actually a tool for tackling our biggest problems. The framework we're exploring identifies what it calls the big five problems holding a lot of societies back. You've got poverty, you've got brain drain, where all the smart, talented people leave. You have authoritarianism, which creates this culture of taqlid, or just blind faith. Then there's patriarchy, and finally, the politicization of religion, which just fuels division and sectarianism. So how in the world does cosmic awe solve poverty? Well, the idea is that these big five problems are all stuck. They're stuck because of old, rigid, stagnant thinking. Cultivating Hyra, or cosmic awe, is like a workout for your brain. It teaches you to be humble, to be curious, to question everything. It's the ultimate antidote to dogmatic thinking. It's about unlocking the creativity we desperately need to find genuinely new solutions. Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. Where does this leave us? It points towards something this framework calls a post-Sufi future. And this is the most important part. Post-Sufi does not mean anti-Sufi, not at all. It's all about honoring the deep wisdom in the original tasawwuf. But it insists that this wisdom has to be compatible with modern science and reason to be truly useful today. It's about synthesis, it's about evolution, it's about creating something new from the best of the old and the best of the new. And that really leaves us with the big question, doesn't it? We've just looked at one specific example, but I want you to think about this more broadly. Can this kind of pro-science filter really breathe new life into ancient wisdom traditions for our modern world? Is it possible to find that timeless core of truth and still be totally committed to science and reason? It's a huge question, and the answer, well, that's still being figured out.